Prison time in Georgia can push any inmate to the breaking point and beyond. From down the road to deep in the hole, prison can be another world of harsh contrasts, where extreme inmates, from the violent to the vulnerable to the condemned, face their own hard time.
If you ain't strong, you're gonna break.
Behind bars, there are two sets of rules: the prison protocol and the convict code.
Quit looking around, boy, before you get your ass skin up.
To survive one code, you may have to break the other. For 1 year, National Geographic followed the lives of inmates and correctional officers in the state of Georgia. When a paramilitary system is up against convicted felons, who's really in charge?
To the hole where you will stay.
This is a year locked in. Despite its idyllic setting, Hays State Prison in Tryon, Georgia is a hard place. But even in this tough environment, Eric Golphin has managed to stand out.
You got the video on?
This morning, he attacked an officer.
Take one step back for me, Golphin. All right, you're gonna put the chains around your waist, all right?
It's just the latest incident in Golphin's violent 5-year prison career, and his third assault on staff.
Go up your arms. Okay, get down your knees.
And it's the final straw.
Now, these are gonna be a little bit tight. Don't be pulling out these cuffs now on the road, all right?
When an inmate is so dangerous that even a prison like Hays can't handle him, there's only one place left to send him. It's called Hymax, and it's the end of the line in one of the fastest growing prison systems in the nation. More than 55,000 inmates live behind bars in Georgia, and more than 7,000 are serving life sentences. Inmates are staying longer, and violence is a constant threat.
They need to get this shit on camera.
And the system, reacting to these extreme pressures, is forced at times to respond with extreme measures. For its very worst offenders, Georgia carries out the ultimate penalty: death by lethal injection. For young, non-violent offenders, there is boot camp, an attempt to shock petty criminals into model citizens. And for the system's most violent inmates, there is a hole so deep that few emerge unchanged. It is Eric Golphin's new home. It is the Hymax. Rick Jacobs, the head of special operations for the Georgia prison system, led the charge in enforcing Hymax protocol.
Our Hymax unit was designed and built to house the worst offender that we manage in the prison system in Georgia.
While you're here, you will not put your hand on any staff, whether they be security or non-security. You keep your hands to yourself. Follow our instructions, and we'll take you where you need to go. Do you understand?
Yes, sir.
When you first come and are assigned to the Hymax unit, you are in a cell 23 hours a day, and if your behavior dictates, then we're going to even keep you in the cell 24 hours a day. This is the end of the road in Georgia prisons. This is the end of the road if you choose for it to be.
I'm not rude, right? I can hold my own anywhere that I go, you know what I'm saying? So if it come down that I got to spend another 5 years on lockdown, then so be it. It don't bother me, no. I know I can take it, right?
Step to the back of your cell.
Eric Golphin may believe that 5 years of hard time have prepared him for Hymax, but this is a very different prison.
We started recognizing that the number of violent offenders that we were dealing with seemed to be becoming more violent. Society as a whole was having the problem, and then it came over to the prison system. We had offenders in our system, several hundred of them, that had presented just chronic management issues, assaults on staff, assaults on other inmates. For lack of a better words, they were a real pain to deal with. I can tell you, one inmate can disrupt an entire housing unit. 3 inmates can disrupt an entire prison operation. Now, you take those in our system that were the worst, the most difficult to manage, the most violent towards others. We bunched them all together, for lack of a better word, and attempted to manage them under one roof.
Hassan Hawkins has been locked up for the last 20 years. By all counts, he is one of the more dangerous inmates in the system, with a pattern of violent behavior that is a serious threat to officers. And if Hymax can manage Hawkins, it will succeed where other prisons in Georgia have failed.
My daddy was a gangster. And he got killed when I was 10 years old. And from there, it was like, you know, that's what I want to do.
On April 20th, 1988, Hawkins and an accomplice kidnapped and raped a woman. They then allegedly hogtied her and locked her in the trunk of her car. Hawkins was caught 2 days later and convicted of rape, armed robbery, kidnapping, and 2 counts of aggravated sodomy.
I ain't claiming to be no good boy. I'm a criminal. I've been a criminal my whole life.
It is a life that includes a dozen attacks on officers and staff, and transfers through 3 different prisons. And since arriving at Hymax, Hawkins has been charged with possession of drugs and weapons, adding to his ever-growing record. Now he can't leave his cell without a heavy escort monitoring his every move.
They're gonna put shackles on you, they're gonna put handcuffs on you everywhere you go. You don't just lose your freedom, you lose total control over everything you do. And it ain't no joke, man. It breaks down the weak and it'll build up the strong. If you ain't strong, you're gonna break. You know what I'm saying? The pressure is gonna get to you.
For inmates like Hawkins, life at the Hymax is as restrictive as it gets. Long periods of isolation that Hawkins claims can drive men insane.
I've seen dudes next door to me commit suicide, throw feces on the officer, and then turn around and hang himself. You know what I'm saying? I've seen it done.
Living in the Hymax, Hawkins is in Georgia's most extreme environment. He's locked down 23 hours a day, alone in his cell.
You got a TV in your cell, you know what I'm saying? But that TV get old after a while. Everything gets old in that cell, even yourself gets old. You can't do with so much working out inside that cell. You know what I'm saying? You get tired of doing push-ups. You get tired of doing sit-ups, man, come on. I know prison wasn't made to be easy, you know what I'm saying? But you got to understand that I'm still a human being. And if you strip me of that mentality and that thought that I'm a human being, naturally I'm gonna act like an animal.
We as humans tend to not think about the fact that, you know, from the day that we're born, we're destined to die.
While Hymax is the system's most severe correctional facility, located in another part of the prison at Jackson is a place where there is no correction to be had. Georgia's death row. Over 100 men wait here for the most extreme punishment the state has to offer. Death by lethal injection. David Crow has spent almost 19 years on death row, preparing for his own execution.
I had known for months that it was coming because you know what stage you're at in your appeals. When you're on death row, death or thinking about death is unavoidable, you know, because it's around you all the time.
Let's face it, it's an ugly story. It's an ugly thing that I did. Well, I took another human life, and I did it in a very brutal and ugly way.
I was an upstanding member of my community. I was a deacon in the church and involved in civic functions. And I went to great lengths to hide my dark side.
On the evening of March 2nd, 1988, David Crow went to a lumber store where he used to work and shot the retail manager in the back. Crow then beat the dying man with a bucket of paint and a crowbar. Before leaving, he stole $1,160 in cash. After nearly 2 decades of waiting, his execution date has arrived.
The last 48 hours is a period called death watch. Everything works on the assumption that in 48 hours, you will be dead. And it does tend to drive home the finality of it, the fact that you've got 48, 47, 46 hours left. By the time it really became imminent, I was praying for the parole board to spare my life.
Administering the death penalty is a grim responsibility, one bestowed upon the prison by the state of Georgia. Now, David Crow will enter the final stages of the state's maximum penalty. If Hymax and death row are reserved for the worst offenders in Georgia, at the other end of the spectrum is boot camp,
Move your body. Let's go. Move.
Here, young men are being given a chance to avoid hard time. 3 to 4 months at boot camp instead of a longer sentence in prison.
That ain't it. There ain't nowhere like no thunder.
A seemingly easy path for the inmates. That is, until they meet Officer Michael O'Kelly.
It ain't hard. It ain't hard at all. Sick and tired. I'm wasting my breath. Y'all jacking around, jacking it up.
They're like they're the hardest thing out there, and once you get in there and you start getting in the face, yelling and screaming at them, they break down like little babies. That's when I'm soft. They're all soft.
Let's go. Go. Sir, everybody leave, sir. Sir, everybody. Did you just pass the officer?
This is shock incarceration.
Eyes and head straight forward.
It's an extreme solution to a difficult problem. How to keep young offenders from becoming institutionalized and transformed into hardened criminals. And its methods are harsh.
Do everybody understand me?
Sir, yes, sir.
Freaking behind. You don't know me. What's wrong with you?
The ones that show just the slightest bit of fear, we'll capitalize on that. And then when we have what's called a hat party. That's when all of us converge on them, and we just start hammering it into them. We start instilling the boot camp doctrine in them.
Probation of Matthews, sir.
You understand what he's saying?
Probation of Matthews.
Probation of
Smith, sir.
You still
Probation of Smith, sir.
You still think it's a joke?
Sir, probation of Smith, sir. Why you fingering rocking your head?
Keep your head straight in, man. Boy, man, smoke up your stinking face.
Sir.
It's just part of our job requirement to instill fear in the individuals. That way they'll listen to us and take us serious. But it's nothing personal.
I mean, it hit me when they started cutting my hair off. I wanted to cry. I wanted to cry. I wanted to cry.
Inmates like Anthony Wilder have been sentenced to boot camp as an alternative to a longer term in prison.
I would have been going to Jackson today if I wasn't going to boot camp.
Let's go. Get out the freaking mirror.
It ain't a big choice. That's a... I mean, who would choose 5 years over 90 days?
And it is not just a matter of time. Unlike boot camp, hardened predators prowl the halls of Georgia's prisons, and bad things can happen fast.
Boot camp protecting you because of the fact you ain't got to worry about nobody trying to kill you. You ain't got to worry about nobody trying to rape you.
Do everybody understand it?
Yet the stakes here are high. Get kicked out of boot camp and you could end up in prison. Down the road, as the inmates call it, to serve your full sentence.
Do what they tell you to do, and it'll make it easier. Unless you want to do some hard time. Everybody in this place is afraid of Jackson State Prison.
Just up the road from boot camp in the town of Jackson is the HIMAX unit, built to manage the system's most unmanageable inmates. But by the spring of 2008, things were not going well. In theory, the HIMAX was supposed to prevent violence by maximizing control over inmates' lives. But in practice, it seemed to be making inmates like Hassan Hawkins worse.
What does a man have to lose if he don't have no hope in the future? I'm gonna sit up in the prison for the rest of my life and do good and follow your rules and go by your rules and your inspections and all this and that and other, and I ain't got nothing to work towards? Come on, man, you joking. I got a life sentence in 40 years, but yet when I get frustrated and angry, I got to take it out on the officer because that's who's gonna deal with me. You wanna come in here for 8 hours and make my time hard? I'm gonna make my 8 hours your 8 hours, and we're gonna see who win that battle right there. I'm gonna do what I wanna do when I get ready to do it. And I don't think it's too much you can do to stop it.
You just started working here, but you can't be complacent with what you're doing. Make sure if you got any question about anything you're doing today when you're dealing with these guys down there, you ask before you do it. Don't do it and say, I'll pay for it later. Later, you might be in the hospital.
The rigors of working the HIMAX are drilled in at every shift change. But new officers like Brandon Booth only truly learn the ropes by doing.
The first thing I noticed when I got here was it was loud, real loud. It's all concrete and metal and a steel roof.
They just called inspection.
You got 32 guys in here yelling at the same time for the same thing, with them kicking their flaps open. I ain't never been struck with such a loudness. The sound reverberates forever.
With inmates mostly on lockdown, the job is an unusual mixture of security and domestic service.
Get ready for an inspection, right?
Booth makes a visual check on each of the 32 inmates on his wing every 30 minutes. He also serves meals, hot drinks, and ice. It's all part of the intense level of control here. There's only one inmate per cell. Beds are bolted into the walls. Each door has a metal cover so heavy, it takes 2 officers to insert a meal tray. And all the doors on the unit are operated remotely by an officer in a glass-enclosed booth.
103?
F103.
When the prisoners are allowed to leave their cells, they are cuffed, chained, and escorted by at least 2 officers. And for the most dangerous inmates, the prison special forces take over. Still, the chance for violence remains.
These inmates live in these prisons. They know where the squeaky boards are. They know the staff that are inexperienced, and they hone in on them.
Sometimes officers do things that, you know, they may not, this may be their first job coming straight out of high school, and they may not understand how to deal with a person that's been locked down for 20 years, that has the frustration that I have built up on me by being in a cell for the past 15 years. You got an officer come to my door, he do something to my tray as far as, you know what I'm saying, he might drop a piece of bread off the tray. And he might say, well, you know what I'm saying, I'll go up to the mess hall and get you a piece. I might not want you to go up to the mess hall, you should have dropped that piece of bread. And I'm gonna have to wait for you to serve all the rest of these inmates to bring me a piece of bread. No, it ain't working like that. I might not be in the mood for it to work like that.
The first week that I was a dorm officer, I was trying to give an inmate a tray, and he grabbed my left wrist. He pulled it across the flap.
And they open up the tray flap, you know what I'm saying? You trick him, put his face down there, you put that razor up on him.
If he could have got my wrist in there, he could have had a razor blade waiting or a shank or something.
Cut him, stick him, or you scald him in the face, you know, with some hot liquid. That's how you get them.
Most of these guys are some violent people. You just never see it until they get the opportunity, and that's all they're waiting for. Some of these guys are just waiting for that opportunity to get their piece of it. You got to be ready for anything that happens in this place, or you can get hurt quick.
Assaults and insubordination plagued the unit in its first year of operation, and the time had come for action to get the unit back on track. Before an inmate is executed by the state of Georgia, he is escorted to the death chamber. And now, 3 hours before his execution, David Crow is a dead man walking.
The execution affects everybody in the prison because they realize what's going on. Each hall we turned down, inmates were facing the wall, and it was dead quiet, which was something I'd never experienced in almost 20 years that I was at Jackson. That was a very respectful thing for the guys to do, was to face the wall and be quiet. That meant as much to me as if they'd stood there and each one of them shook my hand.
When you walk into the death house at Jackson,
that gurney is right there staring you in the face. That's the first thing you see walking through the door. And you walk past that table so close that if you weren't handcuffed, you could reach out and touch it. But I had no sense of fear. I had probably the greatest sense of peace that I've ever felt in my entire life.
Now in the death chamber, Crow has served his last meal. He has requested a steak, baked potato, sauteed mushrooms, and a pint of vanilla ice cream.
The chief steward stands there and she reads the menu word for word. And she literally has tears in her eyes as she does this. You can tell it's having a profound effect on her. And she said, this is the last act that I'll ever be able to perform for you, except to pray for you. And I will be praying for you.
It is now 2.5 hours from the execution. The entire prison knows what's coming, and the countdown continues. In the control room, a phone call comes in.
The deputy warden came out of the control room and said, we were just called and told to stand down, and said if the information we got was correct, the Pardon and Parole Board commuted your sentence to life without parole.
Less than 3 hours before death, David Crow's life is spared.
Everything that I had held in, I think, for the last 48 hours, because I'd tried my best to be real strong, and I'd done a good job of it, I think, but everything just sort of came out. I just didn't have any control over it, you know, just all of that emotion just came out. And I couldn't stand up. Absolutely, I tried it a time or two. My legs would just not hold me up. They had to literally walk me out of the building and hold me up.
It was only the third time in the last 13 years that a death sentence had been commuted in Georgia. The third time that a once condemned man has faced execution and walked away. And although Crow has avoided death, he is now going to Hays State Prison and about to do the hardest time of his life. A fate the New Jacks at boot camp are all trying to avoid.
Let's go, get up. Get out of the rack! Get up!
For the inmates at boot camp, hard time means learning a whole new rhythm.
Get out of the rack!
And their day begins with a rude awakening, courtesy of Officer O'Kelly.
Every morning wake up, call you and shave your face, get your room inspection ready. You understand?
The boot camp program, it had, it appealed to me because I'm ex-military.
Get out of the rack! It's wake up call, hero. Get up and get ready. Let's go. Get up.
A lot of the times it's the first time they've ever been in prison.
Oh.
This is the first trip, as I say, down the road. Trying to teach them a little bit of discipline, a little bit of self-respect.
The 15 inmates who arrived yesterday are still settling into their dorm.
I'm gonna show you how to get these rooms inspection ready. That's not correct. That's not correct.
This will be their home for the next several months. There's a lot to learn and a lot at stake.
Go.
Charles Roberts was facing a 2-year sentence for drug possession. Boot camp seemed like the easy path. But even this early, the harsh realities are settling in.
You come to boot camp and you come into a life of hell. I'm gonna say it just like that. You get no kind of playtime, everything serious from day 1 to day 90. Everything gets serious.
Get it now, you throw. Let's go.
You can't eat what you want.
Suck it up. Lottie-dottie every freaking body. Squat your stinking body.
It feel like it's be below zero out there in the morning when you just got on a jacket and a thermal and...
Pick him up. Put him down. Pick him up. Put him down. Go hit the fence. Go hit the fence. Go hit the fence.
There's a lot of brothers in here that's 17 and just turning 18 and they wasn't expecting it to be like this. They was expecting juvenile. It's a whole different story.
Let's go.
The intense discipline is a shock to the system for many of the new arrivals. And there is no sympathy for stragglers.
Go get a lap. Get a lap. Get a lap. You hear me, Lawrence? Get a lap.
A lot of them, they adhere pretty quickly. Every now and then we'll have one or two that want to try to get jazzy with us, try to buck the system.
Move your feet up and down. You understand me?
I call those my little projects. Now, occasionally I'll take a little project on and I'll show them some individualized attention.
It's 3 stinking exercises. Get out here and do it. Get in the front lean rest, Lawrence. Get in the front lean rest. Start knocking them out. Push-ups, Lawrence. You ain't got it on you, do you, Lawrence? Get up and hit the fence, Lawrence. Get up and hit the stinking fence.
They're playing and they screaming in your face all day, and I don't know. Been pushing me to the limit, really.
Get somewhere, sir. Get somewhere.
Hopefully it'll get better. I'll get used to it.
Body up first. And get your hands straight, bro. I don't want to smell you stink, bro. Just get your hands on something, bro.
But some of us need discipline, self-discipline at that. Cause I ain't never had discipline in my life, and if I had it, I wouldn't be in this predicament right now.
Hey, on your feet, on your feet. Move your body, move, move, move.
We want to try to change the way that they think as far as discipline.
It's a push-up then. How many you want, sir? So I tell you to stop.
They'll come in off the streets. A lot of them, I like to say, want to be thugs. They have this type of thug mentality. So we want to make sure we erase that.
Erasing the thug mentality, a central goal at boot camp. But not everyone wants to change.
You only change out of this if you only get something out of this if you want to get something out of this. They want you to march. They want you to do a lot of different stuff. It's dumb, but they want you to do it anyway. So I just play my part until I get out. I don't be intimidated by none of these people. They might run their mouth a little bit, but that's all they gonna do. Sooner or later, that's gonna stop too. They don't do nothing but make me hate the police way more than what it is now. Cause you got officers like that. You know what I mean? They just don't do nothing but make me hate the police.
We don't reach everybody. There's still gonna be some that get out and go back and do the same thing. It's some gonna take this program for a joke.
Boot camp is about making a choice. Work to become better, or slide by and possibly end up worse. Inmates like Carlos Lawrence could go either way.
Mr. Speak, sir. Speak, Lawrence. Sir, Professor Lawrence and his fellow comrades requested to enter your building, sir.
Carol.
Sir, by your leave, sir.
Carol.
Sir, thank you, sir. Sir!
Lawrence was identified as one of the troublemakers, and we gave him a lot of attention.
By me being a grown man, I really didn't know how to take it. Listen to another person just yell at me and tell me to do this, tell me to do that, and I had no choice but to do it. That was new for me, and I ain't like it, so I said the wrong thing, and I ended up in the hole for 14 days.
It is time in the hole that extended his sentence.
I was like, man, 30 more days of this?
That means more marching, inspections, work details, and submission to boot camp discipline. Now, just a week away from his release date, Lawrence is riding the razor's edge. And if he loses control, his next stop could be the prison at Jackson.
It is strange. I was ready to die on May the 22nd.
Time is now all David Crow has. Less than 3 hours before his execution, his life was spared. For the last 3 weeks, he's been at Hays State Prison in segregation, also known as the Hole.
18 and a half years, I've done everything that I possibly can do to avoid going to the hole. Now here I am in the hole. I think the last 21 days here may be the hardest time that I've done in my 20 years and 4 months. There's only so many conversations you can have with yourself before they start making too much sense.
It is here he must wait until he can join general population. A drastic change from the more contained world of death row. On death row, all inmates live in single cells with carefully controlled movement.
You're pretty much self-contained. You get there, you stay there. We have our own yard. We have our own barbershop. We do not go to the chow hall. I'm not sure what to expect. I mean, you have your culture shock out there and you have your culture shock in here. Even though I've been in prison for 20 years and 4 months, I've not been in prison. And now I'm going to prison, so I know it's going to be an adjustment for me.
Crow spent 2 decades waiting to die. Now he is waiting to live out a life sentence without parole at one of the state's toughest prisons.
It's almost like coming back from the dead. I definitely have been given my life back. I know at some point, a few weeks, maybe a few months down the road, it's finally going to sit in, you know, that, wow, you have life without parole now. I said at some point it's probably the negative aspects of that are probably going to set in on my mind, and I'm going to have to deal with it.
At the Hymax unit in Jackson, Georgia, Rick Jacobs is dealing with the problems at a facility that houses some of the most dangerous inmates in the prison system.
Day one, it was not the best attitude in the world. The highest levels of respect were fairly non-existent.
The first thing Jacobs and his tactical team did was shake down the unit to regain control. Then Jacobs interviewed the inmates, hoping to discover where Hymax had gone wrong.
The biggest thing that we heard going in was, there's no light at the end of the tunnel. No matter how I behave, I'm not leaving the Hymax. There's no system to reward me for acting right.
How do I work my way out from down here? None of that was in place.
You know, the stick and the carrot is the oldest behavioral modification system in the world. It's been used on people. It's been used on animals. It's at the core of everything we do. We had to give them the carrot. They already knew the stick.
The carrot that Jacobs created was an ironclad promise that if inmates behaved, they could improve their living conditions and even someday leave Hymax.
We got 5 phases in the Hymax. Every phase, the level of privileges increases.
Behave yourself, John. You're doing well.
Their behavior dictates how far and fast they move within the Hymax. And if they behave well, they move well. If they behave badly, they stay in those most restrictive housing units.
Jacobs also found inconsistencies in how the new officers were carrying out their duties.
You got to understand this. Inmates are only allowed to do what we manage them doing. If we don't take them out of the cells and put them in a shower to take a shower, they don't get a shower. They know that. We recognized that we had to put in a system in place that was the same today as tomorrow. And then ingrain that into a schedule that nobody deviated from except for an absolute emergency. Inmates become less difficult to manage when they know what's happening next. That was what we learned. We immediately saw the number of disciplinary reports that were being issued to the inmates assigned to the HIMAX dropped. We immediately saw the amounts of assaults towards other inmates or staff go down.
With the HIMAX on a new footing, it is now up to Ernest Mintz, the unit manager, to convince inmates like Hassan Hawkins to buy into the system.
Hassan Hawkins has been locked up a long time. It took a while, but I finally was able to get through to him and let him know that regardless of how much time he has or what he has to do as far as the system is concerned, it can always get better.
I've been given hope, and I've been told by Mr. Mintz, if I do what I'm supposed to do, that I will progress. As long as they keep their word, I'm gonna keep my word. I'm not gonna mess with none of these officers because I see progress. As long as I can see hope, I'm gonna strive for it.
Hassan Hawkins seems to be responding to the new order at HIMAX. For some of the officers, though, the pressures are still there. 5 months ago, Brandon Booth was one of 5 new officers assigned here after graduating from Georgia's training academy.
Out of the 5 that started up here, there's 3 of us left now. It's an emotional challenge for the most part for all of us.
Anybody ready to go?
We as officers feel most of the brunt force of the mood changes and the emotional distresses that go on around this place. It's always on your mind. You never get rid of it. I never get rid of this place.
Palms up. Palms up. Come on, man.
A couple months ago, I had an incident go on here that kind of pushed me a little over the edge. I had a guy in the E-wing. He decides he wants to swing a flap up and try to hit me in the face with it, a big iron steel flap. He was acting all right 10 minutes ago, 20 minutes ago, an hour ago, and then all of a sudden it just went off, and it just turned into a big ordeal. And I kind of had it still on my mind when I got off work.
And later that night, the pressure came home.
I ended up having to go to the hospital at 3 o'clock in the morning. I couldn't, it felt like something was just caving in on my chest. It just scared me because I've never had that pain before. You know, hey, I'm 24 years old and I shouldn't be having a heart attack. I've had a couple instances where I wanted to quit, but this really tested me really hard. It made me realize this could affect your health. This ain't no joke.
HIMAX is running better, but the pressure on some officers may just be getting worse. After nearly 4 months at boot camp, Carlos Lawrence's last day has arrived.
0 days. We up out of here. No more Sergeant King.
Believe it or not, he's actually come around some. It was some work. It took us some time to get him to where he is now.
Sir, nice knowing you guys.
And, that's the whole point. If we can get 1 or 2 to really be serious, then I think we've done our job.
Lawrence has survived the test of boot camp, and for now has avoided doing hard time. But the real challenges lie ahead once he's back out on the street.
What's up, buddy? Yeah, welcome home, boy.
Thank you. Feel real good. I don't ask for nothing else in the world right now. If you complete the program, that means you kept your military bearing, so if you don't complete it, then you fail. What? Military.
While Carlos Lawrence hopes to never re-enter the prison system, Officer Brandon Booth seems to be coming to terms with his job at HIMAX and himself.
I get a little amped every day when I'm on my way into work. I kind of just pump myself up a little bit, whether it be just listening to some music in the car, just keeping that song in your head all day long. I've always just grown up around cars. I've always been around them. That's just the way I find a good way to relieve my stress. I get out here and I build something that could kill you, but if you control it right, it's not going to. The biggest thing I can say that I've learned around this place is I see any man that's in this place, he's already lost something, and he's still got stuff to lose. You can still be in prison and still have dignity. You know what I'm saying? You can be locked down in a situation and still have your dignity and your pride.
Hassan Hawkins seems to be coming to terms with himself as well. It's been 5 months since the system at HIMAX changed, and he's responding to its new methods.
Last time I was in D-Wing, this time I'm in C-Wing.
Open C.
I done moved up a dormitory. Got 2 more dormitories to go. You know, so progressing on.
The biggest change in his daily routine is when he comes out of his cell, he doesn't have to have leg irons on. He has to have handcuffs and stuff on behind the back. He still has to be escorted by 2 officers. But he's in a room with a TV. His front window on his door is not closed. A little bit of things like that. A little bit of things like that is what drives them to do better.
Hassan Hawkins continues to work towards his release from here. But even his new privileges can't erase the reality of Hymax.
You move from this cell block to this cell block, but ain't nothing changing. You know what I'm saying? What's changed? You still locked in the cell. You come to this piece of yard, what they call yard. You standing on all this concrete all day. You know what I'm saying? Every day. So this ain't no privilege. You know what I'm saying? It's like being locked up in a dog cage.
For Hawkins, progress is a hard term to define.
It's routine. You know what I'm saying? Back to back. It's the same routine over and over and over and over. It gets old, and you beginning to question yourself, what am I doing this for? You know what I'm saying? If you ain't accomplishing nothing more than other than what you done started out from, what am I doing it for? You feel where I'm coming from? You can't keep everybody locked down forever.
Today, David Crow is taking his next step. He is entering general population for the first time in nearly 20 years. While it is just a short walk from the Hole to A Block, for David Crow it represents the distance between life and death.
I'm just looking forward to getting used to living. You know, I'm glad to be here, still alive, and be able to have the opportunity to learn how to live in here. Thank you, Mr. Case. Well, I hope I don't see you again back there.
Maybe not.
I have not been in a room this big around this many people in over 20 years. The last time that I was in a room this big with this many people around me, I guess, was probably a courtroom in 1988.
In general population, he will live with a cellmate, get a job, and establish a routine. It will be the closest thing to a normal life he has had in 20 years. And with no chance of parole, it is the only life he will ever know again. This is his new reality, one that still comes with a heavy price.
Don't get me wrong, I want to live. I want to live just as much as you or anyone else. But it is a much worse punishment for me to have to spend the rest of my life in here and thinking every day about what I did than it would have been to face death on the 22nd of May. Because that would have brought an end to this for me